This is not just the best Corolla, it's one of the best small crossovers in America because it's a solid combination of practicality, capability, reliability, affordability, and an honest-to-goodness 40-plus MPG. In fact, on the way to this parking lot, we averaged 48 miles per gallon, and the last time I drove one, I averaged 50 mpg. This is the Corolla Cross, specifically the Corolla Cross Hybrid, which has been refreshed for 2026 with some new tech and some new looks. But oddly, is one of the very few all-wheel drive hybrids in the hottest segment in the USA. The only competition to this is the Crosstrek hybrid from Subaru, going on sale shortly, but that's more expensive than this. And if you don't want all-wheel drive, you could consider the Kia Niro, but that's about it. Let's tackle affordability first. For 2026, the Corolla Cross is going to set you back $26,085 if you want a front-wheel drive, gasoline-only model. The hybrid version comes standard with all-wheel drive and a whole heap more power, as we're going to talk about in this video. It's going to set you back about $4,000 more, $30,445 starting, but compared to a comparably priced gasoline model, it's actually less than a $3,000 jump into the hybrid, and you're going to save a whole lot of gasoline over the ownership cycle. It's also probably going to be the most reliable model. Now, as tested here, we're looking at $37,449, which is definitely a decent bump over that base model, but a lot of the competition will go even higher than the Corolla Cross, and this is about as expensive as Toyota gets here. Now, clearly the biggest change for 2026 is the front-end design, where they've made this look a little bit like the upcoming 2026 RAV4 and some of the other models in Toyota's lineup like the Corolla, where the hybrid model gets a grille that blends from the front on into the side rather than having a separate module. Now, if you want something that looks a little bit more Toyota truck, you can get the regular gasoline version, and it has a more conventional black grille surround up front. We of course get full LED headlights here with LED turn signals, LED DRLs there, and this model even has LED fog lights at the bottom. Somewhat surprisingly, we don't have a blue Toyota badge, something that they've been doing for quite some time in their hybrid models. The Goldilocks Just Right Corolla comes in at 175.6 inches from tip to tail, putting it on the smaller side of the segment, but by no means the smallest. This is about 4 inches shorter than the Honda HR-V, but the difference doesn't really come inside. It's actually mostly in the hood area, where the HR-V has a pretty long nose. This is 7 inches shorter than the Corolla sedan, so a little bit easier to park, and only about 3.5 inches longer than the Corolla hatch. But one of the big reasons to get this over the rest of the Corolla lineup is the ground clearance. Not only do we have all-wheel drive, which is available in the sedan and the hatchback, but we get near RAV4 levels of ground clearance. So if you live in an area where you might want to do a little bit of mild off-roading, pretty mild of course, or importantly, winter weather clearance, you want to check out the Corolla Cross before you get a Corolla sedan hybrid. Out back, the design doesn't change too much. We still have a small spoiler there on top of the hatch, tiny little windshield wiper, combination LED taillights, so the turn signals and the brake lights are LED, but the backup light, that's an incandescent element. No amber turn signals back there, even though the Corolla Cross is sold in other world markets because we get our own taillights for the US. At the bottom of the bumper, we have a shiny black insert, which is not my favorite, but at least it's relatively small. The exhaust tip is tucked up under the bumper, and then on this side, we still get this little disc, which is the Beyond Zero badge. That's always made me laugh since a hybrid is literally before zero emissions. Under the hood, nothing's changed for 2026. The base drivetrain is still the one that you don't want, not because of its 169 horsepower or its continuously variable automatic transmission, but because the hybrid system is simply better in every way. And even though it is more expensive, you'll probably see a payback in the average ownership cycle. Not just from the fuel economy, but from the improved reliability as well. Here we have a 2-liter 4-cylinder producing 150 horsepower. On that side, we have a twin motor setup that acts as a transmission, and then we have a 40 horsepower motor in the back. Everything together gives you 196 ponies, 42 miles per gallon on paper, and closer to 50 miles per gallon in the real world, as long as you're not hot rodding it around everywhere. Those fuel economy numbers are pretty comparable to the Niro hybrid, which is front-wheel drive only, and definitely better than we find in the Crosstrek hybrid, which is interestingly using a Toyota hybrid system as well. Just a Toyota hybrid system with a mechanical all-wheel drive setup. And that is the one thing to know about this. It's not the same hybrid system that we find in the regular Corolla sedan hybrid. We have a more powerful motor in the back. It's going to use that across a greater range of speeds, and of course we get more power, but we still don't find a mechanical all-wheel drive setup. up to about 80 horsepower total, little over 200 pound-feet of torque total. We can split power 50-50 front and rear, but above that, this is going to be biased solidly towards the front. Logically, one reason to get the Cross over the rest of the Corolla lineup is the upright seating position. It may not be obvious, but even versus the hatchback, I am sitting in a more upright, more SUV-like seating position. We have a power driver's seat here with two-way adjustable lumbar support, manual tilt telescopic steering column with a moderate range of motion, and a reasonable amount of headroom left. For me, it's 6 feet tall, even though we have this power moonroof. Legroom is the one area where the Corolla Cross falls behind about half of the competition. This front seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, 180 pounds. I have maybe about 3 inches of legroom left there. Now there is some give in that front seat back, but you would be hard pressed to put especially a rear-facing child seat behind me driving the vehicle. On the other hand, we get a lot of headroom in the back, and this is one reason to get this over the rest of the Corollas, because even with this power moonroof, I have about 2.5, 3 inches of headroom left in the middle seat, which is higher off the ground than the outboard seats. Moving over here, I have about 1/2 inch more headroom. Lots of headroom, lots of practicality. We still have 60-40 folding seats, but they don't fold quite flat with the cargo area in the back. They're just a little bit higher off the ground because the seat bottom cushion, that does not move. That's where the battery pack is located in the Corolla Cross Hybrid. On the child seat front, we get latch anchors for the outboard seating position with these kind of fiddly doors. Not only are these going to get lost, but they have these little tabs that you have to fit in these itty-bitty little slots here to try and put them back on, and I kept getting them in the wrong spots. That's the wrong spot. You kind of have to fish around for that exact right place to dock those doors back. But we have a center armrest with 2 big cup holders there. Shoulder belt for the center position that comes out of the seat itself, not out of the ceiling, so that saves cargo space, and it's going to mean that a child seat in the center is going to be latched a little bit more centrally. Also, we get air vents in the back, which is a nice touch that we don't find in every hatchback in the US. Behind the hatch, which is powered, kind of a nice touch in this model, we find either 24 or 22 cubic feet of cargo capacity, depending on whether or not you get the hybrid. That's a pretty decent showing regardless of the model you get. You can toss quite a lot of roller luggage back here. I suspect you'll be able to fit 3 24-inch roller bags in our testing. You'll have to stay tuned for that in this updated model. But let's talk about the difference between this and the non-hybrid model. The main difference is that the load floor doesn't have a second stage. It doesn't go down. Now, I think that's a bit of a misstep because when you go in for a closer look, you'll notice that the only real difference between the hybrid and the non-hybrid is this electrical connector for the rear motor module, because the battery is not located back here. So their choice to not give us a 2-stage load floor is a little bit unusual. They could have packaged the can of Fix-A-Flat and this absolutely enormous foam divider somewhere else and given us some extra storage space. I would say that this is the only misstep in the Corolla Cross. They could also have given us an actual spare tire if they had simply moved this connector maybe about 9 inches that way. Because check out the size of this foam divider. It is absolutely huge. It's not just the size of a spare tire, it's the size of a full-size spare tire, albeit with the cutout for that electrical connector. As we look around the interior, keep in mind we are in a top-end trim, and I will apologize because it's very bright outside, so some of these shots might get a little blown out. But we have a pretty standard-sized moonroof right here over the driver and front passenger seats. Headliner that's kind of like trunk liner. That is one of the areas where obviously they were cutting corners and keeping costs a little bit lower. There's Travis in the back seat there, so you can check out that kind of headroom we have there. Quite a lot above his head to the ceiling. We have height adjustable head restraints and height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. I really appreciate the blue accents that we're seeing in a lot of new vehicles. This top-end trim of the Corolla Cross notwithstanding, because we have the blue stitching, blue embroidery right there in that section. This is not a fabric seat. It's not a leather seat either. It's an imitation leatherette with a different sort of leatherette going on there in the middle. Kind of interesting texture. Speaking of imitation leather, we have plenty of that on the doors and a little bit on the dashboard. Injection molded upper section there on the door. Soft touch right there on that armrest portion. Hard plastics down below, like around that bottle holder. The dashboard is very similar to the rest of the Corolla lineup, which I think is getting, a little bit old, a little bit dated, but I think is still okay generally speaking. Soft touch material here in the midsection, harder plastics right up there up top. This model has the optional JBL audio system, so we have a speaker up there in that A-pillar. Down here we have a bin-style glove compartment. Decently sized. I suspect you would be able to fit an 11-inch tablet computer inside, although I have not been able to verify that just yet. Moving over to the center console, we have, rather unfortunately, a big swath of piano black plastic. I'm not sure why we need a Steinway factory in here, but we've got some of that going on there. We have dual zone automatic climate control in this model, and we have the latest Toyota infotainment software up here in the dashboard. Well, actually, I guess technically not the latest, because that's coming in the upcoming RAV4, but this is what we find in most of the lineup in the US. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto there, of course, and it uses the entire screen. If we hit that little expand button, kind of a nice touch. So if you don't want to ever see that Toyota interface, you don't have to if you don't want to. Down below that, we find a Qi wireless charging mat. It's actually over there on the left side, just barely big enough for some of those larger smartphones in cases. Doesn't go any further back than that. This is just another phone slot, but not a charger location. Down here, we have toggle switches for the heated seats. Some Subaru fans might love that because these are going to stay on when you power cycle the vehicle. Definitely important if you live in a colder climate. Heated steering wheel button also stays on. Kind of an interesting touch there. This is one of the few vehicles I can think of that does that. Drive mode toggle, EV mode toggle, and a pretty traditional console shifter. No joystick like we find in so many hybrids out there. Auto brake hold button, electric parking brake, two big cup holders back here. They weren't forgetting about your big gulps. Lots of hard plastic, but thankfully only shiny black plastic in this area right there. Then we get a padded center armrest that opens to reveal a fairly small storage cubby with a USB-C charge-only port right there. The interface port for CarPlay or Android Auto, that's right here. It's not my favorite location because it is kind of in the way of everything, but this system supports wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, so you don't need to do that if you don't want it. Moving on over to the driver's side of the dashboard, hard plastic is the name of the game up here on the side and for that binnacle cover, but we get a big LCD instrument cluster here. This is common with a number of other Toyota models, so it is highly configurable. You can choose what you want in each of these three sections of that display. Moving out from there, we have a steering wheel that's pretty similar to the rest of the Corolla lineup. Paddles on the back for imitation gear shifts there. Controls to control that multifunction LCD cluster on the left side, as well as volume up down. Track forward, backward, and the adaptive cruise control controls are over here on this side, and adaptive cruise control is standard. On the sun visor front, we get vanity mirrors for the driver and front passenger with lights up there on the ceiling, and we get this little extension on both sides rather than a pull-out sun visor design. All right, it's time to get the Corolla Cross Hybrid out on the road. The first thing you'll notice is that it sounds kind of like it has a CVT, but in reality, it drives more like an electric vehicle in a way than the average CVT because it doesn't have that rubber band-like feeling that you get in a regular Corolla Cross or most of the competition with actual CVTs under the hood. In the truest sense of the word, this doesn't actually have a regular transmission at all, and that's part of its secret sauce in a way. We get a lot of electric torque from those electric motors, and up to about 80 horsepower total, it can split power front and rear 50-50. But you'll notice that there's no mechanical connection, and that is going to be obvious if, for instance, you floor it from a stop and you're turning left or turning right. You get a little bit of front wheel peel that you wouldn't get in a vehicle with a mechanical all-wheel drive setup like the regular Corolla Cross, although that has so much less power it probably couldn't even do it even if it wanted to. 0 to 60 times in this model, 7.3 seconds, which is very respectable. If you want to go quicker than this, 0 to 60 in this segment, you have very few options. The most notable is the turbocharged Mazda CX-30. But I actually think this drives better in some situations than the CX-30 because it has a fully independent rear suspension, something that we do not find in that Mazda. In our preliminary testing out here in Sonoma, I measured 122 feet from 60 miles an hour back to 0. Keep in mind we are driving the very top end trim, so those scores will change depending on the trim level you're looking at. And aside from that, it's a very civilized vehicle. Handling is decent for the segment. It's not outstanding. It's not going to be the best handling vehicle, but I'd give this at least an A- here because it feels very well composed thanks to that independent suspension in the back. In the Mazda, sometimes the rear suspension can get upset over broken pavement. This is definitely a little bit more refined than the models without an independent rear suspension, but of course the big thing is we get the immediacy of that electric motor, which gives you 0 to 30 times that are definitely very solid for this segment, and incredible fuel efficiency. Over today, we've been averaging right now 35 miles per gallon. Again, on the way to where we were filming the vehicle, 48 miles per gallon. We then let it idle for about 2 hours, and that's why our average has dropped down to about 35. But if you treat this gently, you can easily get in the high 40s, maybe even 50 mpg. And what's interesting about this hybrid system versus some of the hybrids that we find in the next segment up, like a Honda CR-V for instance, is that the fuel efficiency benefits also include higher speed travel. Yes, you're going to notice lower fuel economy obviously at 75 miles an hour versus 65, but this does not drop off as rapidly as other hybrid system designs because it has an infinite number of ratios between the engine and the wheels, and it's sending most of the power through that loop mechanically, not electrically, like a serial hybrid. It's a really cool kind of hybrid system. Getting back to the rest of the scores, I'm going to give ride quality a B in this trim. We do have the lowest profile tires available in the Corolla Cross, but it's not just that. You also get a little bit more bobblehead in here thanks to the shorter wheelbase versus, say, a Toyota RAV4. It's worth mentioning the RAV4 here because there is likely going to be at least a little bit of pricing overlap between the 2026 RAV4 and this model. We don't know pricing on the RAV4 just yet. We're going to be driving that a little bit later this year, but I suspect there's going to be at least a tiny bit of overlap. The RAV4 is going to give you pretty similar fuel economy. You're going to get a little bit more pep because it uses a slightly different hybrid system from the Toyota lineup. And a lot of folks have asked, why is the fuel economy so similar? Well, a lot of that really just probably has to do with the ground clearance that we're talking about that is going to change the aerodynamic reality of the vehicle, and the fact that frontal area, etc., is not too different really between this and the RAV4. In reality though, in real world driving situations, you will get better fuel economy in this than the RAV4. It's just not going to be an enormous difference. So you have to choose, are you going to spend more for the same feature set in that bigger RAV4 and accept a slight fuel economy reduction? That's up to you, but I have to admit that value for money, that RAV4 is probably going to be very, very good. For our official cabin noise score, you're going to have to wait until we get one of these back at home, but so far out here, I would say it's pretty average for the segment. Not exceptionally quiet. If you want something quieter, you probably want to check out one of the Buick models. Those are pretty darn quiet in the cabin. If you're looking at something like a Kia Niro, I'd actually say it's a little bit louder and gruffer in some areas, but not substantially that much different. Speaking of the Niro, fuel economy in that model is fantastic. Thanks to the dual clutch transmission, it also does relatively well at higher speeds and in mixed driving, and it's going to have a more traditional feel. So if you want to come to a stop and you want to accelerate from the stop and you want to feel shifts, not everybody is happy with the fact that vehicles like this tend to drone on as you accelerate, then you want to check out something like the Niro. Just know that it's not necessarily going to be better in performance, definitely slower than this 0 to 60 for most drive cycles, and it's not necessarily going to be that much more fuel efficient either. Also not more fuel efficient is the Crosstrek hybrid. That's the new hybrid from Subaru. It basically uses motors from the Toyota parts bin, most likely the motors from either the Highlander or the Camry hybrid, and then it rotates them around inside a Subaru transmission case, bundles that with a Subaru mechanical all-wheel drive system and a Subaru engine. The Subaru Boxer engines are generally gruffer and a little bit louder than the engine that we find here, and the mechanical all-wheel drive system, while a bit more capable, is going to result in lower fuel economy, especially in real-world driving. Now, if you want to know more about that hybrid system, again, stay tuned because we are going to be driving that coming up soon. For me at least, the Corolla Cross is an easy win and a top recommendation in this segment because the price tag is absolutely right. The gas version starts just over $26,000 including destination, the hybrid model just under $30,500 including destination, and even this top-end XSE trim at $37,500 basically is still a pretty solid deal, especially when you factor in the fuel economy and the reliability. Not just Toyota's reputational reliability, but the reality that this kind of hybrid system is mechanically incredibly simple because we simply have one planetary gear set, 2 electric motors up front, and that's it. If you want to go backwards, it simply spins one of the motors backwards. It doesn't even have a reverse gear. And that's what I've always loved about Toyota's hybrid system. The closest competitor, in my mind at least, in this segment is not the Crosstrek hybrid, which oddly uses a very similar hybrid system to this, because it's actually about $4 grand more expensive, relatively comparably equipped. We will be driving that soon, so be sure and stay tuned for that video coming up on the channel. I would call that sort of a semi-step above in terms of capability because it has a mechanical all-wheel drive setup and of course all the Subaru-ness that you've come to expect. The Niro is priced more like this, but it's front-wheel drive. It doesn't have the ground clearance that we get here. It will get slightly better fuel economy in some driving situations, and the dual clutch transmission has a more normal feel because it has a stepped automatic transmission in it, but reliability-wise, this should excel over that Kia in general terms. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and what would you choose if you were shopping in this segment? Would you get something like this? Would you get the Crosstrek hybrid, which has pretty similar performance? Interesting twist, of course, because it uses basically the same hybrid technology, just rotated 90 degrees under the hood, and then of course has that mechanical capability. Or would you just get something like a Niro because you want better fuel economy and you don't need all-wheel drive? Let me know down there, and we'll see all of you later.